Fast forward to today. The United States faces a crossroads that could shape its economic destiny for decades to come. President Donald Trump's latest legislative proposal isn't just the largest tax cut in American history. It's a sprawling, complex package that touches nearly every corner of the nation's finances. If enacted, it would mean deep reductions in taxes, sweeping changes to social programs, and a controversial overhaul of federal spending priorities. The Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan scorekeeper, has issued a stark warning. This bill, as written, would add a staggering $3.3 trillion to the national debt between the years 2025 and 2034. To put that in perspective, that's almost 1/10 of the entire current U.S. debt pile, which already towers at more than $36 trillion, a sum nearly impossible for most people to truly comprehend. The contents of the bill are a grab bag of headline-grabbing measures. There's a permanent increase in the child tax credit, a $5,000 refundable adoption credit, and a plan to eliminate all federal taxes on tips, a move aimed at helping millions of service workers and gig economy employees. For families with young children or those considering adoption, these changes could be transformative. Yet, the bill also proposes severe cuts elsewhere, a nearly $70 billion reduction in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, and a jaw-dropping $930 billion cut from Medicaid. These are not abstract numbers. They represent lifelines for millions of low-income Americans who rely on these programs for medical care and basic nutrition. The debate has fractured party unity. Republicans, holding a slim majority in the Senate, are deeply divided. Some, like North Carolina's Senator Thom Tillis, have openly voiced concerns about the bill's price tag and the risks it poses to fiscal stability. In a weary exchange with reporters, Senator Tillis admitted, "They're still trying to get a resolution on the vote and will probably have an hour delay because they've got to get all the technical corrections right." His fatigue underscores the bill's complexity and the sense of urgency permeating the chamber. Meanwhile, Democrats have seized on the bill's costs as a rallying cry. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, after more than a dozen hours of debate and nearly 24 amendment votes, called the bill a moral monstrosity on social media, highlighting the depth of opposition and the sense that something historic is at stake. But the political drama is just one layer. Behind the scenes, international bond investors, those who buy and sell the debt that funds America's government, are becoming increasingly anxious. For decades, U.S. Treasury bonds have been the ultimate safe haven, a bedrock of the global financial system. Now, whispers of a multi-trillion-dollar debt surge are making even the most steadfast buyers nervous. Major ratings agencies like Moody's have already expressed concern about the deteriorating fiscal health of the United States. Maya McGuinness, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, summed up the mood. "We urgently need a plan for a sustainable fiscal trajectory." As tension escalates, an unlikely feud has erupted between two of the nation's most high-profile figures. Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk has thrown himself into the fray, publicly blasting the bill's cost and threatening to fund primary challengers against any Republican senator who votes in favor. President Trump, never one to back down, responded by vowing to slash federal contracts and support for Musk's companies, SpaceX and Tesla. It's a high-stakes public clash with real consequences, stoking anxiety among lawmakers and adding a volatile new dimension to an already unpredictable debate. Amid the sound and fury, a quieter but equally serious debate simmers among economists and policy analysts. If this bill passes, could it truly spark an economic boom, as its proponents claim? Or are we looking at an unsustainable explosion of debt that could haunt generations of Americans, potentially undermining the country's economic leadership in the world? And what if the bill fails? In that scenario, the tax cuts passed during the Trump administration in 2017 would expire, potentially resulting in a more than $4 trillion tax hike, especially hitting Americans making under $400,000 per year. As the Senate burns the midnight oil, scrutinizing amendments, wrangling over technical corrections, and battling fatigue, one thing is abundantly clear. Every vote, every clause, every comma could tip the scales toward prosperity, disaster, or something uncomfortably in between. Deep divisions, powerful special interests, and wildly divergent visions for America's future are all colliding under the Capitol dome. Is it even possible for Congress to steer the nation down a responsible path before it's too late? Let's explore the possible paths ahead and what they could mean for ordinary Americans and for the world economy. If the bill passes, supporters argue that a short-term economic sugar rush is almost certain. Businesses, buoyed by permanent research and development write-offs and generous expensing provisions for factories, may ramp up hiring and investment. The bill would restore immediate expensing for domestic research and development, a move cheered by technology and manufacturing firms, which argue it will fuel innovation and keep the United States competitive against rivals like China. A senior economist at the Tax Foundation told us, "Immediate expensing is a powerful incentive, and this could spark a wave of new projects and jobs over the next 2 years." Supporters also point to the expanded child tax credit, which would rise to $2,200 per child, temporarily increasing to $2,500 through the year 2028. This could lift millions of families out of poverty and give working parents a much-needed financial cushion. The refundable adoption credit, now up to $5,000, would make it easier for families to provide permanent homes to children in need. Yet these benefits come at a steep cost, both financially and socially. The Congressional Budget Office projects that the national debt would increase by more than $3 trillion over the next decade, on top of a debt pile already exceeding $36 trillion. Moody's Ratings, one of the world's top credit agencies, has already sounded the alarm, warning that the United States' fiscal performance is deteriorating and could eventually threaten the country's prized AAA credit rating. The Joint Committee on Taxation has estimated that federal tax revenue will fall by $4,700 billion between 2025 and 2034. The Bipartisan Policy Center projects a federal deficit increase of $3,800 billion over the same period. These are not academic concerns. They have real-world consequences for government services, interest rates, and the value of the dollar. The social costs are equally sobering. Over the next decade, SNAP, the Federal Food Assistance Program, could face a reduction of nearly $70 billion. Medicaid, the primary source of health care for low-income Americans, could see a cut of $930 billion, a sum larger than the annual budget of many entire countries. For families already living on the financial edge, these cuts could mean the difference between access to medical care or going without, between feeding their children or skipping meals. Consider a real-world example. A family of 3 in California, earning $20,000 a year and receiving Medicaid and SNAP benefits, would see a net change of minus $870 as a result of this bill. Their taxes would increase by $751, while their benefits would shrink by $1,621. Yet, bold voices on Wall Street and in the corporate sector insist that the risks are worth taking. Elon Musk, for all his criticism, is not the only billionaire with an opinion. The CNBC CFO Council survey, which gauges sentiment among chief financial officers at leading firms, indicates that most major companies are optimistic about the bill's pro-growth potential. Many expect the legislation to unlock new investment and job creation, especially if the immediate economic boost outweighs longer-term risks to debt and deficits, at least in the near term. So, what does all of this mean for you, the ordinary American? First, it's a reminder that headline-grabbing policy battles in Washington can have very direct effects on your daily life. If you're a parent, the expanded child tax credit could put extra money in your pocket, but only for a few years before it drops back down. If you're considering adoption, the refundable credit could make it more affordable. But if you depend on Medicaid for health care or SNAP for groceries, the proposed cuts could force painful choices. For investors, the debate over the national debt is not just an abstract concern. Bond yields, interest rates, and the performance of the stock market all hang in the balance. Changes in the U.S. debt profile could affect everything from your retirement savings to the cost of borrowing for a home or a business. It's a powerful reminder to stay informed, diversify your investments, and ensure that your household or business budget is resilient to potential shocks. There's another lesson here about the impermanence of tax and benefit rules. Congress can and does rewrite the financial playbook. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was itself a sweeping overhaul, and its provisions are now set to expire unless Congress acts. If this new bill fails, those tax cuts could vanish, resulting in a multi-trillion-dollar tax hike that would hit working and middle-class Americans hardest, particularly those earning less than $400,000 annually. On the policy front, experts are divided on the best way forward. Some, like the Council of Economic Advisors, estimate that the debt as a share of gross domestic product could fall to 94%, compared to the current 117%, if the bill's growth projections hold true. Others, like the Bipartisan Policy Center, warn that the plan could add nearly $4 trillion to future deficits, undermining the nation's long-term fiscal health. The bill's details are fiendishly complex. For high-income earners, the legislation proposes to limit the value of itemized deductions to 35 cents on the dollar, aiming to make the tax code slightly more progressive. There's a new cap of $40,000, phasing down for those at the very top of the income ladder, and the income threshold for the highest earners rises to $500,000. Many of the new tax breaks are scheduled to expire after the year 2028, adding yet another layer of uncertainty to household and business planning. Let's not forget the hidden provisions. Buried deep in the text is a permanent restoration of immediate expensing for domestic research and development. This seemingly technical change is, in fact, a game changer for the American innovation sector, giving companies the ability to fully deduct research investments in the year they are made. It's a secret weapon that could keep U.S. startups and tech giants at the forefront of global competition, but it comes with a steep price tag. Looking abroad, America's fiscal decisions will echo far beyond its borders. The country's appetite for borrowing has long underpinned the global financial system. If confidence in U.S. debt falters, nations that hold trillions of dollars in U.S. assets may reconsider their positions, potentially triggering capital flight and financial instability worldwide. International markets are watching closely, with many analysts warning that a loss of faith in U.S. fiscal discipline could spark a global rebalancing of investment portfolios. As the dust settles, what are the possible futures? If the bill passes, expect a burst of economic activity, more jobs, higher growth, and perhaps a spirit of renewed optimism. But also brace for a larger national debt, higher deficits, and the possibility of painful cuts to safety net programs. If the bill fails, the expiration of the Trump-era tax cuts could mean a sharp tax increase for millions, especially those in the working and middle classes. A legislative stalemate could breed uncertainty, discouraging business investment and undermining consumer confidence. For families, the stakes are deeply personal. A single parent in Ohio might welcome the larger child tax credit, only to find that cuts to Medicaid leave a child's health coverage in jeopardy. A retiree in Florida could see the value of her savings eroded by rising interest rates, while a young entrepreneur in Texas contemplates whether the new R&D expensing rules make it the right time to launch a startup. Across every state, city, and town, the ripples from Capitol Hill will touch real lives in unexpected ways. Above all, remember that economic policy is never just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about values, priorities, and the kind of country we want to build. Will Congress choose bold action, cautious compromise, or paralyzing gridlock? Will lawmakers find a way to balance growth with responsibility, opportunity with security, innovation with stability? This is more than a political contest. It's a crossroads for the economy, for families, and for America's place in the world. The choices made today will shape the lives of millions and the nation's destiny for years to come.